Okay, Kelly.
Thank you, Angela. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Bar Talk on this May 24th of 2021. Nice to see you all again. I am fresh back from a week in the woods with my family. We went up and paddled the Allagash, and I'm happy to report that we have all donated blood for the year. We're all a few liters dry at this point, and the black flies are healthy and alive. In northern Maine a couple of weeks early, which is a bummer because one of the selling points to my family was it might be cold, but there aren't going to be any bugs. And instead we're paddling in like 80 degrees and getting eaten alive. But it was a great week. My thanks to Angela for covering Bar Talk last week in my absence. And let's hit the ground running this week with an unbelievably timely presentation about from Anne-Marie Storey. About from an employment law perspective about COVID-19. This is timely because, of course, today, or was it yesterday? Anne-Marie can correct me on that. Those of us who are vaccinated can now be mask-free indoors and outdoors, which I still don't know how I feel about that. I think I'm going to be a little uncomfortable going into a store without a mask on, and I'm still trying to decide how I want to approach that. I might want to model good mask wearing behavior. I don't know, but thankfully, Anne-Marie is here to educate me and all of us on all of these issues. Anne-Marie, thank you so much for being willing to join us.
I'm happy to be here, Kelly. Thanks for having me.
Well, again, you would think that we had some future telling genes going on here because Angela lined this up for a perfect day, very timely issue. So we're going to, Anne-Marie has a lot to say. As she goes through her presentation, I want to encourage you to put questions in the chat and I will interject them. We can make this as much of a dialogue as folks would like. But now let me just turn it over to Anne-Marie and say thank you for joining us and take it away.
All righty, thank you. So there is an awful lot to talk about, so much that it's hard to even know where to begin, but I'm aware of speaking to you as the audience, both as employers yourselves who may have staff who are affected by all of these things and you're trying to figure out what to do in your own business, but also as attorneys who may be advising businesses and your clients about what all this means. So I'm trying to take both of those things into account as I go through this. Today is the big day, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that's true as we start. I'm gonna break this into three separate sections because there are three separate entities at a minimum that we're dealing with, three primary entities. One is the CDC, one is the state of Maine, and one is OSHA. And they all have requirements. Some of them are the same, some of them are questionable, and so we'll talk about that. And then I can answer some of the questions that I've been inundated with for the past several months, but particularly this morning, which I presume most of you may have as well. And of course, as Kelly said, if you have questions of your own, feel free to shoot them up there on the chat, and that's what we'll do. So let me start with the CDC. And of course, today is the day that the CDC guidelines go into effect. And what they say is that fully vaccinated individuals, and make sure you're clear that this means somebody who's had, for the 2 shots that require double doses, both doses and the waiting period, or the single dose shot plus the waiting period. So that's what fully vaccinated means. Fully vaccinated folks may resume activities without a face mask as of today, or staying 6 feet apart from others. So this is pretty much free for all vaccinated people. Now there are a few exceptions, of course, and those are very important to our discussion, because one of those primary exceptions is that the CDC guidelines defer to other federal, state, local, tribal, or territorial laws, rules, and regulations, including local business and workplace guidance. So that's a very important piece of what we're going to talk about. It also does not apply to certain forms of entities, and those include medical facilities, doctors, hospitals, or long-term care facilities where distancing and masks are still required regardless of vaccination status. traveling and being in transportation hubs, as well as prisons, jails, or homeless shelters. So those are exceptions to the rules that we're going to talk about. Also, the CDC said that if somebody is vaccinated, they do not have to quarantine or test following a known exposure to a COVID positive person, as long as they are asymptomatic. If the person develops symptoms that are associated with COVID, then they are advised to start masking again and be tested. But as long as they're asymptomatic, they do not have to do that based on an exposure. And it says that they can, employers and whoever else can refrain from routine screening testing as long as people are asymptomatic. So those are the general guideline under the CDC. To talk a little bit more about that as it applies to the workplace generally, what the CDC has said, of course, is that vaccinated employees do not need to wear masks or observe social distancing protocols in the workplace. However, the CDC recommends, but does not require, that unvaccinated employees should continue to maintain the same COVID precautions, which includes masking and distancing. It also suggests that vaccinated vendors, clients, or other visitors to a workplace do not need to wear a mask, but unvaccinated people in those categories are recommended to wear them. So this is where it leads to questions about what employers are supposed to do with this information. Now, remember I said that, that the CDC guidance exempts or defers to not only other federal, state, or local laws, but also individual businesses and workplaces. Before we get to that, let's talk about the two other categories that are impacted here. So the next question is, okay, great, the CDC says we don't have to do this anymore, but what about OSHA? Because we've known from the beginning of this COVID situation that not only do we have to follow the guidelines that the CDC is putting out, but we have to worry about OSHA, because OSHA creates a general duty of keeping a workplace safe under the circumstances. And so what we have said almost from the very beginning, based on these guidances, is that as long as an employer is following the CDC guidelines, they are also most likely in compliance with OSHA's general duty clause. So then the question is, does that remain true now that the CDC has said you don't have to do any of these things all of a sudden? You don't have to mask anymore. You don't have to social distance. Well, OSHA had not given any guidance on that, and that was a little bit unnerving to those of us who follow this. But last week, they issued a statement, not a formal statement, but just a little blurb on the website. And the operative part of that says, OSHA is reviewing the recent CDC guidance and will update our materials on this website accordingly. Until those updates are complete, please refer to the CDC guidance for information on measures appropriate to protect fully vaccinated workers. So that gives us some comfort in terms of allowing vaccinated people to unmask and not follow those guidelines anymore. But you notice it says specifically measures appropriate to fully vaccinated. It does not speak to unvaccinated people. So in my mind, there's still some gray area there for OSHA to find a violation for an employer if they allow unvaccinated people to unmask, okay, even though it's a guidance from the CDC. And then, so now we have to throw in the third piece of this before we can figure out what to do. And the third piece of this is the state of Maine. Again, the CDC made a specific statement that they are deferring to other state if the state has a different order in place. So this changed for the state of Maine as of last Wednesday. And last Wednesday, the governor issued a new executive order that's effective as of today. So that's why today is an important day for us. And this order repeals the prior face covering orders that had been in place requiring that face coverings be worn in public settings. So what that order says is that businesses can still ask, suggest, or require that their employees, guests, and customers wear masks, but it is entirely up to the business as to whether to do that and to what extent. It then says that the state is going to be retiring their checklists as of today. So you recall that they had a whole series of checklists in place for businesses and other entities like restaurants and hotels and hospitality entities. And what that, by retiring those guidelines or the checklists, what it means in practicality is that there is no longer a 6-foot distancing requirement, and capacities for business are at 100% both indoor and outdoor, and there is no longer a need for contact tracing. So all of that is done away with as of today. And the last piece of the order is that Maine is not requiring anyone, meaning any business, whether you're the employer or the business with customers, to ask to see a vaccination card or proof of being vaccinated from any customer not wearing a mask or from their employees, okay? So those are the 3 components that we have to figure out when we now decide what is a business supposed to do as of today. The bottom line appears to be that the CDC says that you're vaccinated, you don't have to do all these things anymore. OSHA insinuates, but doesn't flat out say, that they're in agreement with the CDC, but they don't address unvaccinated people or give an exemption for that. And the state of Maine is saying that that businesses can do what they choose to do, and that no one, vaccinated or unvaccinated, is required to wear a mask at this point or follow other guidelines. So, and the bottom line is that each business now appears to be able to do what it chooses to do. So the questions that I am being inundated with, of course, is the first one is always, should I have people wear masks or not? What should I do? And am I required to do anything in particular? And my answer to that is, again, this sounds to be primarily up to the business's judgment. A business can ask for employees who are not vaccinated to continue to wear a mask and follow the social distancing requirements. Then the issue becomes, how do I know whether someone's vaccinated or not vaccinated? You are permitted as an employer to ask for proof of vaccination. So you can ask for the vaccination card. I would not ask for any more information than that. That card is sufficient to answer the question. You do not want doctor's reports. You do not want medical records. You don't want anything other than the card if you're going to ask for proof. Having the card, the ADA or the EEOC has said that asking for the card is okay. It does not violate the ADA. It's not a medical inquiry that's protected, and it does not appear to violate HIPAA. So you are okay to ask for the card. The question is, what's right for your business? Because some businesses are saying, I want to trust my employees. I don't want to have to ask for proof. I don't want to run around checking off people every day. And that's okay. You don't have to ask for it if you choose to let people make that representation to you, but you should do one or the other, in my view, because to be as safe as possible, I think well, the safest route under all 3 of these components is to allow vaccinated people to unmask, but ask that unvaccinated people continue to mask when they're in the workplace and to follow social distancing. Does that create uncomfortable situations? Absolutely. And we've already heard about a bunch of them today. People feel isolated, they feel singled out. But I can tell you that from a legal perspective, you are not violating the law by asking someone to continue to wear the mask. I mean, obviously, there are always the exceptions to everything, and you have to keep in mind the ADA or Title VII if somebody has a medical or a religious reason why they cannot mask, and that hasn't changed from the issues we've been dealing with all along. Okay, so in terms of masking, now I do get questions about, can I require people to wear some kind of outward symbol of having been vaccinated? My answer to that is I don't see the purpose, because if you have somebody who's been vaccinated, they've shown you the card or they've made that representation to you, you run the risk of singling people out that way, and you don't want to get into medical inquiries that you're not permitted to have. So Kelly, I can see that too. Shall I just go ahead? The question was, can we trust employees but ask customers for proof? Can we ask some customers and not others? Well, I can answer for the employment part of it. Customers is outside my realm as an employment lawyer, but I can answer in terms of employees. I mean, the question is, I don't know, can you trust your employees? From, from a legal perspective, what the CDC suggests is that you either ask for proof of vaccination or for the person to affirm, and that's the word they use, affirm that they have been vaccinated. So if you choose not to ask for proof, you should at the very least ask employees to affirm that they have been vaccinated, and then you don't have to go any further than that. I think that it should be, based on the language of the CDC, sufficient proof that you've taken the steps that you're supposed to take to protect your workplace. We can, well, so I do have one thing to say about customers. If you are going to try and enforce a mandate for customers, just like all along in terms of wearing masks or asking them to make some representations about it, be very careful about who you are requiring to do that in terms of your employees. So in other words, you may not want to put a receptionist in a position where he or she is having to ask people this question, or potentially get into a fuss with somebody about whether they should or shouldn't, or why they have to answer it or anything like that. And that's been the same all along. My thought is that you would have a devoted manager or somebody at that level who will deal with those situations just in case there's a problem. All right, I don't see any other questions there. Are we, we're pretty much at our time limit though.
You've got a couple more minutes.
Okay.
If there's a couple more highlights that you want to touch on. This is important stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that it's hard to sort of figure out, what is left to talk about in such a short period of time. I would venture to say that communication is one of the most important elements here, because employees want to know, and obviously they need to know what they're supposed to be doing and what you as an employer are going to expect from them. I would strongly suggest that you reevaluate all of the systems and policies that you had put into place up through today, which probably contemplate masks and social distancing and all of those things, to figure out how you're going to make changes to the workplace now and what should be anticipated for the future. I also did want to point out that you can't forget that the ADA continues to apply. And so if there are people who say that they cannot be in a workplace unmasked, or they're afraid to be there without a mask, and now everybody is unmasking, you still need to go through an analysis in the event that person might be a covered person with a disability. So don't forget that those things still apply as well. I see.
Yeah. Two more questions, Anne Marie. Do you think there are WPA implications if employees complain about not requiring masks for customers?
I certainly think there could be. I mean, if it's, yes, under certain circumstances, I think there could be. And I think you have to be very careful about retaliation. I think if employees have concerns, you should address them and deal with them. In fact, there was that news story this weekend from that employer in Salem, New Hampshire, who ended up firing every single employee they had based on disagreements over the issue. And I'm almost certain that's what's going to result from it. So yeah, this is tread carefully area for sure. And that's why communication, I think, is so important.
And then the next question is, are we required to ask employees if they are vaccinated?
There's no requirement that you ask, but because the CDC is making a distinction between vaccinated and non-vaccinated, even though the state no longer makes that distinction, and OSHA appears to be making that distinction as well, I think you would be remiss in not trying to make that clear that the rule. Well, first you have to figure out what you want your rule to be. And if your rule is going to be, if you're vaccinated, you can unmask, and if not, then you cannot, then I think, yeah, you need to make some effort to ask whether it's through a requirement to see the card or just having somebody affirm that they are.
All right, great. Go ahead and put any more last questions that you have into the comments. Anne-Marie, thank you so much for taking your time. You've got so much good information. Really appreciate you sharing that with our members today.
Sure. I mean, if people have follow-up questions, they can always just contact me directly too. That's no problem.
They know where to find you.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Anne-Marie. I really appreciate it. Let's go ahead and move on through the rest of our agenda for today. We don't have a huge amount to talk about. Angela, do you have, there we go. And so obviously we've just talked about the masks and all of the developments that happened last week. And again, I'm just not sure what I'm going to do when I walk into a grocery store. I've still got a kid who's not going to be vaccinated because she is under 12. So having different parts of the family do different things feels unfair. The judicial branch is inviting input into what the judicial branch should look like post-COVID. If you have ideas on any such subject, here's the email address to send them to. There's an opportunity to submit amicus briefs on anti-SLAPP suits. That's due June 8th. And Angela, over to you. Anything you want to say about court alerts and closings or about the association?
Well, there are still some closings in some of the courts across the state. So again, just double check the website for those. They're listed through the end of May. I don't know what will be, if they'll just update that in June or not, but for now they're listed through May. Reminder again, save the date for the Summer Bar Conference. We've got the programming lined up. I know we are working on the registration page right now. It's a little bit behind schedule, but it should be up hopefully within the next couple weeks. And new to the slide this week is the Run for Justice. It's a virtual 5K run walk that the new lawyers section has pulled together. And I believe it's a $20 registration fee. And then you can also make donations to the Campaign for Justice at the same time that you register. And you'll see their Run for Justice on the slide is a link. So once this gets posted to our website, you'll be able to click that for the link to register. And no bar talk next week. It's a holiday, and I hope you all have a happy Memorial Day.
And on that note, we are going to be talking as an association about what to do with bar talk over the summer. And we are considering putting on hold or maybe dialing back the frequency of it. If you have an opinion on that, please share it with Angela or myself as to whether you would very much miss seeing our faces every Monday to start out your week. We'd be happy to hear that. Here are a couple of tips for you. On billable hours, for those of us who have to track billable hours. I was taught this as a young associate, which is if you do not get your time in every day, you are going to miss out. You're going to miss out. You're going to miss out on billing clients, which means lost revenue. If you wait until the end of the week, or even worse, until the end of the month, I just find it just about impossible to piece together what I did in the past. So I make a point of finalizing my time entries in the program that we use every single day at the end of the day, if at all possible. Wellness tip from Angela. I like this because smiling is a wonderful thing. And now we can actually see each other smile if, of course, we are fully vaccinated and together in an indoors or outdoors setting. I wanted to put as a wellness tip, get vaccinated. And Angela said, no, there's some controversy there. We want to be cautious about that. But from a personal perspective, that's what I would say. And the gratitude is appropriate because I had a lot of people cover for me over the past week. My colleagues at my firm, Angela, here on Bar Talk, and I'm really grateful for that. It was really wonderful to take a break. And I feel a little bit refreshed and back into it now. So with that, unless Angela, you have anything else? Oh, one last plug. Use more muscles in your face to smile than a frown. So you're getting more exercise when you smile. I like that. I do want to make one last plug for that Summer Bar Conference. I know we're all tired of Zoom. But it was really great to go through all of the submissions that were sent in, and there's a lot of really interesting topics. So I encourage you to check it out, to sign up. And hopefully this will be the last virtual bar conference we have to do. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in person. But this is a great opportunity to get in your CLEs and see some of your colleagues present. So with that, thank you all so much for being here for Bar Talk today. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week. The last week of May. Happy summer already, somehow. And we will see you not next week, but at some point in the near future. Take care, everybody.